the Wartales.
Hello and welcome everyone. Otto here with my 10 favorite builds from Wartales. This is not necessarily my top 10 list, though right now these are my 10 favorite builds to go with in the game. This has been a highly requested video. I'm going to try and go through this quickly as to cover as much as possible, but in the future what we will do is we will break down each of these builds in a lot more detail, and I'll demonstrate in some clips how to use them in the early game, the mid game, and the late game. We'll do them individually, and we can do lots of other builds, but I just wanted to kind of give you guys a bit of an overview of the builds that I really like and how I sort of put them together. They're not necessarily perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but these are kind of the play styles that I sort of like to lean towards. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Build number 1. Coming in at number 10 is the Hunter build. This is a build that's not going to have a lot of bells and whistles. However, it is going to give you a fair bit of versatility on the battlefield, especially in the early game and the mid game. Late game, they might not be as useful, but in the early and the mid game especially, they're definitely going to have their uses. And I think everyone who follows my streams by now has sort of come to the conclusion that I do really love the archers. I mean, the crossbowmen are a lot of fun too, but I really enjoy the archers just because they have a bit more range. But in any case, let's get into the build. We've made her a fisherman. She can also be apothecary is good. The thief is good. The tinkerer is really good, and actually even the new huntsman class would work as well. So those are your primary classes that will work really well with that. I mean, you could potentially make an argument for brewer, but in any case, she's our fisherman. And then we've given her valorous support. I just usually go with this for the archers because of its reliability. However, valorous chain, there's an argument to be made for that, and also valorous victory could work really well for archers, especially once you've unlocked the bravery. The valorous victory will get you potentially heaps of valor points right at the start of the battle if you're using kicking things off at that bravery. But in any case, like I said, it's really this ability that makes the build. The hunter, the recoil shot just gives you tons of flexibility on the battlefield to be able to push units around, to be able to hit multiple units, and to also be able to slow down other units. The first unit that's hit by the hunter's shot is slowed down for a couple of turns. It just gives you lots of flexibility on the battlefield to be able to manipulate the situation as is needed. And then down here, level 5, we've gone for precision. Every 2 attacks applies vulnerability and gains fury. So I find that one is usually really nice, though this one I think works probably best with the infantryman, but it's still useful on this guy. Thrill of Hunt, each round the first attack executed at a distance of 6 meters grants 3 rage, so that's useful as well. And then I've gone with Anticipation in this particular build. Just gives her the opportunity to stay alive. Basically a coin flip whether or not she gets engaged if she's attacked by a melee unit, and then she gets the attack of opportunity off. It's just, in terms of durability, it will help her stay alive a little bit longer. However, there's certainly an argument to be made for second weapon. One of the things I like to do with the archers sometimes is have the primary bow, and then the secondary bow will be the fugitive's bow, which allows you to shoot fire. Another popular one is the Alzerian, though not myself, but a lot of people do like I think it's the Alzerian bow that allows you to shoot mud, which slows down the enemy. So there's certainly an argument to be made for the second weapon, and even Lone Wolf can work also, but I would say if you're going Lone Wolf, probably don't pair it with Valorous support, use one of the others. But Lone Wolf can work as well if you want to keep your archer away from the rest of the group and away from the fight mostly, which typically the archers you can do that as well. And then quickly, the gear that we're going with, I've given her a pocket knife. Usually I go with quality projectiles. However, we're to the point where our critical hit is almost guaranteed. So I just feel like the additional 15% is a little bit better than the 10% damage you get for range attacks on the pocket knife if we're almost guaranteed getting a crit every hit. And then nothing crazy for oils. Using the Braves oil just to recoup a little bit of the Valor when we're spending our Valor points, and the Swiftness oil to improve the dexterity. So nothing crazy there. There's definitely other options that we could use for the oils, but that's what we're using on this particular build. And her weapon is a legendary weapon that you pick up from one of the bounties. The Avenger gives violent impact, deals damage to the target, and knocks them back 2 meters. If the target hits an obstacle, then the damage is doubled. So that's really nice. And then I'll try and go with some rare armor. This one's giving a little bit more range, a little bit more willpower. And then we are going with the colossal layers of the Falcon, which I think is probably my favorite of the layers for the ranged units. And then her helmet, we've put the enhanced visibility stamp on there. Every time this unit is engaged by an enemy, they perform an attack of opportunity. So even if anticipation doesn't work, then the enhanced visibility will be triggered. So she's got a 100% chance to deal an attack of opportunity every time she's attacked by a melee unit. So that's primarily to try and keep her alive a little bit longer. But that's our girl. That's Freebird, our hunter class. Moving on. Coming in at number 9 is the Vanguard class. This is a class that I had up to the most recent playthrough. I had never tried before, and I believe the viewer Nikos was the one who turned me on to the Vanguard, and boy howdy, was I ever missing out. This is a really fun class to use. So we've got the Vanguard ability, which is the core stat for this. Relentless Charge. Disengages and charges into a straight line, deals 93 damage to all units on the trajectory, and applies slowdown for 1 round. And if at the end of the turn this unit is next to an enemy, they gain Fury. So that's the key ability, which is super useful in certain situations. Usually you can hit 2 or 3 enemies, sometimes 4, but usually you can run over 2 or 3 enemies, deal a fair bit of damage, and slow them down. Now we've also put Defensive Stance. Each time this unit takes damage from a skill, you gain 1 Valor point. I was just kind of experimenting with this, but that's not bad. But we've also given Valorous Chain. So our Vanguard here has 2 ways to get Valor. We've given him Armor Breaker, which damage inflicted to armor increased by 35%, and then if an attack from this unit destroys an enemy's armor, the unit gains brutality and inspiration. So inspiration, the movement doubled. Anytime you can trigger inspiration, it's incredibly valuable. Just doubling that movement, having movement on the battlefield is so key. So I do really like Armor Breaker. We've also given him Guard Breaker. Attacks dealt ignore all of the enemy's guard, which means he's dealing significant damage on impact. And then we've also given him Defensive Riposte. So when this unit disengages, they have a 50% chance to deal an attack of opportunity instead of taking one. So it's not, it's like, I mean, the other options here, I mean, Intervention, there's an argument to be made for that. It doesn't really need a second weapon because the weapon, when we get into it, is really, really powerful. And then Class Specialization, yeah, we gave him we doubled up on the Valor points. But Deafening Roar, it's okay. It's not my favorite of the braveries. You don't necessarily need braveries on every one of your companions because most combat, at the very most, is going to go like 5 rounds. So you're not necessarily going to need to use all of your braveries. You can only use 1 per round. So I usually like to stick with the Archer's braveries and the Swordsman's braveries. And then I feel like there's one more that I'm missing, but yeah, those are the ones that I usually go with. But in any case, the gear that he's tricked out with, Dagon's Hammer, this is such an awesome weapon. We've put on their Immunity Oil and Explosive Oil. The Immunity Oil means has a 50% chance to avoid poison, burning, or bleeding. And then we've given him the immunity oil concentrate, which makes him basically immune from poison, burning, and bleeding. And then the explosive damage means when he's swinging this hammer, there's explosive damage that hits the other units around. So where is it? Explosive oil. Every time a skill deals damage, has a 50% chance to also deal 50% damage to enemies next to the target. So with such a wide area of attack with Dagon's hammer, and he's hitting multiple times, that explosive damage is really, really sweet. His armor layers, reinforced layer of the Seg, pretty standard, just gives him more strength, more armor. And then we've given him the stimulating coating. Damage increased by 20% if this unit has no debuff, which, because he's using the immunity oil, gives him most of the time 20% more damage on his attacks. So that is our Vanguard class. He's also wearing the rare Legionnaire armor, which gives him damage from attacks of opportunity, which is fine. There's probably better options, but for whatever reason in this playthrough, we hadn't been getting a lot of drops for medium rare armor. But what are you going to do? Anyway, that's our Vanguard. Let's see what's next. Number 8, the Poisoner. This is a class that will allow you to really dominate the early game and the mid game. I find I'm not using the Poisoner quite as much in the late game, just because by the late game, you're more or less taking units out in the first round with 1 or 2 hits or 1 or 2 attacks. And the Poisoner's usefulness kind of is a little bit outgrown. However, for arena fights, they can be super useful. And like I said, in the early game and the mid game, when you're getting sort of swamped and overwhelmed by numbers, by waves of enemies, the Poisoner will save your ass all day long. So Poison Berry, this is our girl. We've made her an alchemist. Again, the standard options are alchemist, tinkerer, thief, fisherman, and the new class, the huntsman, would work as well. But I like the alchemist. I feel like it suits her really well, especially because she's going to be making a lot of things in the alchemy office as well for her second-hand weapon. But we went Valorous Victory. I think that's an obvious choice. Poisoner ability, be able to apply those poisons. And then the Rangers, pretty much every Ranger, I pretty much always go with the Instinctive Throw because of the fact when you upgrade it, it resets the movement. When you upgrade this skill with a skill book from the Brotherhood Training Ground, every time you get your Instinctive Throw off, your movement is reset, which is incredibly powerful. It just gives you so much flexibility on the battlefield, which is super important. And then, of course, we've given her Explosive Gas. Poor girl. Doubles the poison attacks on all units in the area. This allows you to just melt like huge groups of units with poison. Like if they're clustered together, you can do so much damage with that. We've also given her a second weapon, and I'll go into the reason why we've done that. And we've also given her Unstoppable. So we've used class specialization rather than her bravery. Decisive maneuver, it's not bad, it's all right. But the only downside to this is that you only get to trigger it at the end of the round. So I mean, it's still good, and you could make an argument for using it, but I preferred the class specialization because I wanted her to have 2 weapons, and I wanted her to have Unstoppable, because Unstoppable, again, you're going to notice a trend with all of these builds, is what I'm looking for is flexibility. Like, one of the most valuable things that you can have on the battlefield is options, and the more options you have to deal with whatever you're facing is usually better. But I mean, you could also go Anticipation as well. There's nothing wrong with that. That's, again, something that's going to make her a little bit more durable over time. But yeah, there's also an argument for Decisive Maneuver, but the one downside about this is that you only get to use it at the end of the round, whereas like you might need her to make that second move earlier in the fight, which you know, is what it is. But in any case, this is the gear that we're going with for our girl here. So she's got the Viper. This you get from one of the arena fights. We've put poisonous oil and sharpening oil on there. So the poisonous oil allows her to apply a little bit more poison when she's so the poisonous oil also affects the bombs when she's tossing these bombs. So between the poisonous oil concentrate and the poisonous oil on her blade, it gives the bombs a percentage chance. Yeah, so basically 100% chance to apply poison. So every time she throws a bomb, it also applies poison. You can also use the poison flask, which is super useful to put those poisonous gas clouds around. You just have to be careful not to get yourself poisoned or one of your crew members. And the only downside to using the poisonous flasks is that they're a little bit more expensive in terms of materials than the bombs. But I really like the bombs. The bombs are a nice one. But early game, mid game, I was using the poisonous flasks a lot more, just because you can kind of create a wall of poisonous gas between using the flask and the explosive gas. You can really inflict a lot of damage with that poison and just have enemies just wading through clouds of poison, which is super useful. For her helmet, the stamp that I've given her is Galvanizing Shout. The reason why I've done that is because it gives her the ability to double her movement, the ability to apply inspiration to herself and another unit is incredibly useful. You're not going to use it all the time, and there are other stamps or abilities that you could put on here that would work really well, but I just like having on my rangers movement is the key. And then we've given her additional movement and additional critical hit. You can make the argument for the layer of the Falcon, but again, for the Rangers, because they're so mobile and they need to be mobile to be able to get in and do hit and runs and things like that. Movement is kind of what I've leaned towards, and the critical hit is really nice as well. And then I should have mentioned earlier also. Oh, and of course she's using the herbarium, but what was I gonna say? Oh, should have mentioned earlier as well. Typically, what I like to sink my points in for most of my units is these three skills here: willpower, critical hit, and movement. I typically push those more than the others. I have heard that the base skill, you can, by adding points to the base skill, you can get more damage in that way. But willpower, the higher the willpower of your party, the more quickly battles will end, the more quickly you'll trigger galvanization, and the more quickly enemy units will run from the fight. So willpower is always good. You also want to go with willpower because it pushes. Once you're over 15, the first time your unit is killed in combat, they won't die right away. They'll have a chance to stay alive. And then willpower also increases critical hit by just a tiny bit, which even a tiny bit is nice. And then critical hit, the more critical hit you have, the more critical damage you do as well. So that is also useful. And then, like I said, movement. But those are typically on most of the characters, unless I'm doing something specialized like a tank build. I will potentially do things a little bit differently. But right, before we finish up with this build, we've given her second weapon because occasionally you might not necessarily want to use Viper. Like Viper, you'll be able to like knock out really tanky units with a single hit if they've got a lot of poison stacked up on them. But sometimes there'll be situations where you won't necessarily want to do that because you'll want the poison to take its effect after that unit has taken its turn. So the Viper is not necessarily always one that you're going to use every single time. Sometimes you'll want to let the poison sink in and you'll want to wait till the next turn. to make your attack with Viper. So because of that, and because certain situations where she might be able to hit multiple units and also inflict more poison damage on multiple units, we've given her the Ringleader's Dagger, and I've just tricked it out with critical damage, the sharpening oil, and the Brave's oil to recoup a little bit of valor. So just super flexible unit, and one that will allow you to really overcome odds when you're being swamped by enemy waves of enemies. So Poisoner, a lot of fun with this class. I've really enjoyed using the Poisoner. All right, coming in at number 7 is our Strategist build. This one is one of my personal favorites. I really enjoy using this character. It's a really kind of a gadget type build, but it's one that's going to give you, again, more flexibility on the battlefield and a little bit more options. We've named him the Batman, and we'll go through the list of skills here, the specialization. So Valorous Victory, typically that's what I go with for pretty much all of my Rangers. I just find it the most useful. Strategist. This is a nice little ability that allows you to create a smoke screen to push units back, but it also triggers an attack of opportunity for any of your units that are engaged with enemies. So if you get a handful of your tanks engaged, bring your Strategist in, drop a smoke screen down, they get an attack of opportunity. Or if there are situations where you have units that are engaged that you don't want them engaged, you want to break the engagement, this is the perfect way to do it. So like I said, very much a gadget type build, and something that'll give you more options in different situations. Super useful. Again, Instinctive Throw, I think this is just such a crucial skill for any of your Rangers. The fact that when it's upgraded, it resets the movement is just incredibly powerful. So every time he's using a skill, he's doing the Instinctive Throw and resetting his movement, which, if he's inspired, means it's resetting double movement, which just gives you so much mobility on the battlefield, which is so useful. Low blow. I think this is a really underrated skill, can be extremely useful, especially when you've got a lot of enemies coming at you. They're grouped up together. They're going to take more turns than you've got to be able to deal with them before they're going to get their attacks in. So you throw the low blow down, and each one of those guys will have a 50% chance to miss their next attack. So if you apply this to a wide area where a number of enemies are in there, all of a sudden they're just swinging and missing, which is a lot of fun. And then we've given him Unstoppable. This just gives you so much more options to get in and out of where you need to. I just find it super useful. Most likely what we're going to do when he hits level 12 is we're going to give him the class specialization and then probably Anticipation. He doesn't really need a second weapon, because we'll get into that when we get to his weapons, but Anticipation is probably what we're going to give him, just give him that extra durability. However, if you are using a smaller party, I don't know, anywhere between like 1 and 7 guys, I would say the Decisive Maneuver is definitely an excellent option. This will give you, basically gives him 2 rounds of action in the first round of the fight. So yeah, you can get a lot done with that. And in particular with the Strategist, that means you'll be able to use your smoke bomb potentially at the beginning of the fight with a couple of your tanks, and then, or the beginning of the round, and then in this sort of at the end of the round as well. So you could do double smoke bombs, potentially, getting a little extra damage in there. So really useful. We've made him an apothecary. Again, he's going to be cooking up a lot of the hand bombs, so it just makes sense that he's an apothecary, but the standard professions that boost up either critical hit or dexterity work well for him as well, or something that gives willpower. You got plenty of options there, so yeah. That's the profession. Obviously, because he's an apothecary, he's got the herbarium. And then we've given him a Rod's left-hand glove. You earn this from the Arena of Legends, one of the fights. This is the reward. Deals 30% extra damage with thrown items. So he's going to get that extra damage on the bombs. He's going to get that extra damage on his instinctive throw. And then he's going to get that extra damage with the Elder Guard. This is a legendary weapon that you get from one of the special bounties. Gives the Rain of Daggers attack, deals damage to the nearest 3 enemies within 4 meters. It's one of my favorite weapons in the game. It's just a lot of fun. It's not crazy powerful, but it's a lot of fun to use. We've put the Brave's oil on there to recoup some of the valor, and also the Swiftness oil, which increases his dexterity for 3 rounds. There's other oils that we could use as well, but that one works plenty fine. And you know what the weird thing is? I feel like this is like off the top of my head, this is the only primary dagger that you can throw in the game. I don't know if there are any other ones. Usually it's just the offhand weapon that you can throw, but I feel like this is the only primary dagger weapon that I know of that is actually a thrown weapon, which is a little bit odd. And then he's using the Looter's Hat, which is the one that comes already with the Galvanizing Shout, which is what we covered earlier. This is just really useful in certain situations where you need to double his movement and the movement of another character. Just gives you a little bit more options on the battlefield and a little bit more flexibility, which is obviously one of the common themes here. And then we've done something a little bit different with his armor layers. We've given him the Surian Brooch, which gives plus 10 dexterity but minus 9 armor. We've given him the Mare Brooch, which gives plus 15% critical hit, minus 1 movement. And the Surian Brooch, which gives plus 40 armor but minus 3 critical hit. These brooches you'll find in the Pirates of Beleriand DLC from various quests. You'll earn them as the rewards. So essentially, we've given him plus 10 dexterity, and then minus 1 movement, and plus 12 critical hit, and plus 31 armor. So it's just a little bit of a more balanced approach, but obviously the reinforced layer of the rat works well, or the reinforced layer of the falcon works well. You got lots of options there, just depends on what flavor you want to use. But that's our Batman. That's the strategist build. A lot of fun with this one. Coming in at number 6, another of my favorites is the Silver Swordsman, aka the Silver Server. Sometimes call him Silver, but this is a Swordmaster build. Yeah, I really like this one, though I will put in the caveat, I do seem to go through a lot of these guys. Usually they're in the thick of the fighting, and I use them somewhat recklessly, so they do end up dying on occasion, probably more often than I'd like to admit. But we have buried a number of variations of Silver, Silver Server, John Silver, whatever I had named them in the moment. They do tend to die on occasion, but it's a fun unit to use. But we'll get into it. We made him a Bard, which gives him a bit more constitution, a bit more willpower. Nothing crazy there, but not bad. And so this gentleman, Swordmaster, allows you to attack all the units in the range two times after you've already done one attack. What we've given him is bombs as his second-hand weapon, which means he can toss the bomb and then which will trigger his Swordsmaster attack. And then what we've also done is we've given him Clink's Sword. This is a weapon, a legendary weapon that you can find early on in the game if you're playing on adaptive. If you're playing on region locked, you don't want to pick it up until I think around like level 7. I think is what you get it at if you're on region locked. But this is in the north in a place called the Forgotten Cave. But this weapon allows you to attack a target 3 times, and on the third attack it pushes the target back. So it's an attack with multiple attacks, but the fact that you can push a target back means that you can push the targets where you need them to be able to trigger the Swordmaster ability. So yeah, it's super useful. You can do a lot of damage. You kind of manipulate the battlefield in a little way. But we've also given him Valorous Chain, obviously because of the Swordmaster ability, but also when you're using the hand bombs, this triggers the Valorous Chain as well. You could also use torches, but we've gone with the bombs in there. And then we've given him counterattack, which gives him Riposte. The first time this unit engages during the turn, they gain Riposte and Fury. First time they disengage during the turn, they gain Inspiration for 1 round. So this is super useful. But what I really like on the Swordsman, probably one of my favorite skills or abilities, whatever you want to call it in the game, is Hardcore Training. This unit is immune to bleeding, poison, or burning, and when you upgrade it, the unit gains 2 rage instead once per effect. Once it's upgraded, you want to be running through fire, you want to be running through clouds of poison because it just enrages the unit and makes them stronger. This is just such a great ability. I really love it. And then I've gone with a second weapon here. I'll show that when we get back into the other screen. But when he hits level 12, we're going to give him Exhort, which is one of my favorite braveries. Usually it's the Archer's bravery and the Swordsman braveries that I lead on the most. Exhort: the unit and all allies in the area gain Zeal for 2 rounds. So Zeal gives critical hit and critical damage increased by 30%, which is pretty sweet. Nothing wrong with that. All right, so he's tricked out with a lot of really, really awesome gear. Like I said, Clink Sword. This is the one I usually, if I'm playing on adaptive, it's one of the first things I do is I go up and pick up Clink Sword, drop it on my Swordsman, giving him the Brave's Oil on there and critical damage. Obviously the Brave's Oil to recoup a little bit of Valor, but the Sharpening Oil just to get a little bit more critical damage. There's other options, but those are the ones. That's the one I like. We've given him the Broker's Morion. You earn this by completing the trade and craftsmanship paths. And this is like, initially when I earned this, I'm like, this thing is not very good. But now that I've been using it for a little while, it's freaking awesome, especially with the archers. If you use the archers, not to digress here for a moment, but if you have an archer that can hit multiple units, just have him stand beside, especially with this this bravery. If you're down on Valor, one of the things you can do to kick off a fight is have your archer stand beside the character that is wearing this helmet, which makes them proud. Each time the unit deals a critical hit, they gain 1 Valor. So they fire the suppressive fire, and I mean, obviously this works with other units that have an area of effect, but they fire it and then they gain a Valor point back for each critical hit, which is pretty awesome. I mean, you can use it with other units that are standing beside him throwing bombs. That could work as well. Or if you've got like a unit with Dagon's Hammer, if the Silver here is in the middle of the fighting, put the Vanguard beside him, swing Dagon's Hammer, and then all of a sudden you're hitting a whole bunch of crits. It's a really awesome way to recoup Valor in a fight. Just you want this guy in the center of the fight, and folks standing next to him, they've got to be right up against him, but they gain Valor every time they land that critical hit. Very underrated helmet. He's got a pocketbook, generates a small amount of knowledge experience for each rest. This is not really got anything to do with the build, but it just, it is what it is. And then we've given him the Trophy of Legends. You earn this after completing the first round of the Arena of Legends. I mean, by first round, I mean like all of the, before you do the difficult version of it. Like if you clear the Arena of Legends, you get the Trophy of Legends, which gives Silver here, once per fight, he can use 2 base actions in the same turn, which is kind of nice, especially with an ability like a triple attack, which means basically he can attack 6 times in that first round. But we are going to try out Clink Sword. Is a nice early game, mid game sword. I don't know how it still has its uses in the late game, but we've given him a second weapon because what I'm going to try and do, I have never used this sword before. I'm looking forward to trying it out, but you get this from the Drawnback Tomb, Mayhet's Copus, and there's potentially an argument to be made that this may be the best sword in the game. Forged from an immutable metal by the ancients, this sword has vanquished time itself, so Eternal Glory Strike. Fatal Blow gains 2 Valor points. So since he's got this Trophy of Legends equipped, what we can do now is we can potentially soften up a target with Clink's Sword, or push them into a certain position. We can soften units up with the bomb, and then we can do the Eternal Glory Strike to get the 2 Valor points. Or if we're taking on 2 tanks, we could soften them up with Laceration, hit them both with the Laceration, and then go in and finish them with Mayhet's Copus. So I'm really looking forward to trying out Silver with the 2 weapons, but that's our build for the Swordmaster. Swordmaster could definitely be done with a 2-handed weapon as well, but we've gone with the 1-handed for this guy. He's just got multiple ways to attack and numerous ways to gain Valor. He's a Valor-producing machine with this Broker's Morion. All right, moving on. Coming in at number 5 is our boss-killing Bruiser. This is a build that I've covered in the past in detail. The Bruiser, called it the Wolverine build because obviously the Pugilist most closely resembles Wolverine in terms of superheroes. But we'll go over this quickly since I've covered it in detail in the past. This one is tweaked slightly, I think, from that build, but the concepts are essentially the same. So we've given him Brewmaster, gives him more Constitution, more critical hit, but does lower his willpower. Bruiser, the Skullbreaker ability, between the 2 stances, you can either apply Fragility for 2 rounds with the defensive stance, or you can increase the damage that you're doing equal to the target's guard with the attack stance. So either one, you can deal some significant damage there. And then Adaptation. This unit can now change stances more than once per round. Every time the unit changes its stance, the first attack gains 2 rage. So Adaptation I find extremely useful because it's granting that rage, which gives you a little bit more attack. So basically, before you make your attack, you want to make sure you flip around your stance, and then that way you get the rage. We've gone with Stance Mastery, and attack stance damage is increased by 20%, and defense stance damage taken is reduced by 20%. So you want to mostly be using attack stance. However, when you end the turn, you want to probably flip it back into defensive stance so that it's reducing your damage. We've also given him Unstoppable, which allows him to pass between enemy ranks. It just gives him that extra bit of maneuverability so that we can get him where he needs to go. This is our primary guy for taking out massive bosses. He can usually pretty much take down any boss or champion in a single round, mostly because of this bad boy, Thrashing. This is insane, this attack. Deals 17 to 25 damage to the target 10 times. Each attack increases the next attack's damage by 20%. So attack stance attacks 5 more times, so 15 thrashing, or defense stance heals 3% of maximum health for each attack. So if he's down on health, he can heal himself up, or if he wants to take the unit out, stay in attack stance, and you get those extra attacks in. It's a crazy, crazy bravery. I mean, the braveries are all incredibly powerful, but this one in particular, if you want to really take out an enemy, it's so freaking good. And then my personal opinion, the Brotherhood Cestus is the best of the pugilist weapons. Even I think it's even better than the legendary ones that you pick up out in the Balerian Archipelago, just because the barrage of blows deals 34 to 42 damage to the target 2 times. Attack stance attacks 2 extra times if the target is engaged with an ally. So if an ally has an enemy engaged, you get 4 attacks right away, or If Jin himself, if your Bruiser himself is engaged, he gets 2 attacks, 2 additional attacks. So what you can do is if you're picking a target that's not engaged, hit him with the Skull Breaker first, and then switch into defense stance and hit him. You'll get the additional 2 attacks there. So yeah, super useful. He's wearing the Craftsman's Medallion just because he's the brewer. He's always on the brewing equipment, so he's always gaining us a little bit of professional experience. This Master Craftsman's Medallion, I believe you get from the trade and craftsmanship pathways when you start making the various trade routes and stuff. I think this is one of the first ones they give you. You know, to min max using this thing, you want to switch it around to your cook and to your whoever's doing professional stuff, like your alchemist. If he's brewing something, you can switch it around if you want to min max things. But I just usually just leave it on my brewer just because he's always on this, and during every rest he gets us a little bit more knowledge. And I mean, we're at the point in this particular campaign where we don't really need any more knowledge. We've sort of accumulated enough. We've pretty much unlocked everything. But in any case, he's wearing the Pirate's Lucky Charm. Every time this unit lands a critical hit, their critical damage is increased by 5% for the rest of the battle. Because he's attacking so many times and because he has such a high critical hit chance, we're continually increasing his critical damage, which you're going to notice a little bit of a theme here. He's wearing the reinforced layer of the Falcon for critical hit and critical damage. And then we've given him the Legionary's Oath, which is something that you pick up in the... you'll earn this from one of the missions in the Skelmar DLC, clearing one of the baronies. This is your reward. Damage increased by 5% per attack executed until the end of the turn, which means every time he executes an attack, his damage it just continues stacking, and because he does so many attacks, every attack gets a little bit more deadly, a little bit more deadly, a little bit more deadly. To the by the time he's done, the attacks are absurd. However, if you don't have the DLC or if you don't have this unlocked, then the pocket knife, there's absolutely nothing wrong with the pocket knife. If you've got one of those, I would definitely recommend using it on this bad boy because yeah, he really packs a punch, quite literally. Anyway, that is our Bruiser, the boss killer. All right, boys. Number 4 on my list for favorite builds is the Marksman. This particular class I've really warmed up to. You'll unlock this by clearing the Ludern arena and talking to a bloke, I believe in the north, one of the northern buildings. It might be the fishery building. I can't remember exactly, but there's a bloke out there somewhere who will teach you this this skill. Aimed shot deals 132 damage to the target. Damage and critical hit increased by 5% for each meter separating the target from this unit. It's just so useful to snipe particular units. Have a lot of fun with this bad boy. And the further away you are, the more damage you use. So just use your deftness and just step as far away and you can really snipe some units at a distance. But again, specialization, valorous support, you could definitely make the argument for valorous victory or even valorous chain, especially considering the bow that I'm using for this archer. I've gone with precision here for Otto. Every 2 attacks applies vulnerability and gains fury. We've also given easy prey. Damage increased by 50% against targets that are not adjacent to any other unit. And then anticipation, just to keep him alive a little bit more often. He's got that opportunity to, yeah, we've covered this before, but I mean, this just makes your units, especially the ones that are wearing light armor, a little bit more durable, just because they've got a 50% chance not being engaged by someone who's getting an attack in. I mean, typically your archers, you want to keep them away from the front lines and away out of the reach of any melee units, but occasionally it's not possible and you'll get caught. But anticipation just gives them a little bit more durability. And then of course suppressive fire. This is just such a powerful bravery. It's super useful. And yeah, so that's our build. What he's rocking with, so he's a tinkerer. Gives him critical hit plus 12%. He's also got a wooden ruler. Has a chance to retrieve part of the resources used in tinkering. And then I've given him pocket knife, same logic as before we covered this. Just his critical hit being so high, I think it's a little bit better than the quality projectiles because he's pretty much hitting crits on almost every shot. And then the Indomitable one is the bow that we're using. You can make the argument that this bow should probably be paired with a hunter. However, I think it honestly will go good with any archer. I don't know. I don't think there's really any argument. I think this is the strongest bow in the game by far. It's really, really useful. Piercing arrow deals 74 damage to all the units in the area. Critical hit, the target is knocked back by 2 meters and loses 10% of their maximum health. And so you can hit multiple units with this, doing heaps of damage. We've put the Braves oil on there and the sharpening oil. There's definitely an argument to be made for explosive oil. Actually, I think I was going to switch out the Braves oil and put explosive oil there, so we could have just maximum damage, not worry too much about recouping the Valor. And that's actually something I think I forgot to do. But yeah, I think explosive oil, just because this unit or this arrow is hitting multiple units, you can get that explosive damage in there as well. And then for layers, reinforced layer of the Falcon. I think this is the most practical. Gives critical hit and dexterity, boosts that up. And then rather than the enhanced visibility, I've given him the stimulating coating. Damage increased by 20% if this unit has no debuffs. So if you're going for a little bit more defensive, enhanced visibility, but if you want to deal a bit more damage, the stimulating coating is a good one. And yeah, that's pretty much it. He's also the captain of the group as well, so he's got the galvanized troops, which I don't know. I find with the archers make okay captains, but you don't necessarily want your tinkerer to be a captain. But in any case, that is our marksman build. A lot of fun with this one. It just yeah, having a sniper in the party is super useful. So I've really warmed up to this one. All right, moving on. Coming in at number 3 is the Sentinel. This build is one that honestly I don't think I could go without in a party now that I know how strong it is. I mean, the Warhorse, if you're using a Warhorse, you get a little bit of the same ability, but the Ovation here is so strong and so useful. There's rarely a battle where I don't use it at least once, sometimes using it multiple times in a battle, but it's incredibly useful. So the next time this unit is attacked by their engaged opponent, they attack in return with an attack of opportunity canceled if the unit moves. However, the big part of this is when you upgrade this with a skill book, gives inspiration, which doubles movement, and movement just gives you so much flexibility on the battlefield that it's just incredibly useful. And the area of effect for this is 12 meters, which is much larger than the area of effect that the Warhorse's ability for inspiration is. It's incredibly useful. So what we've done here with our Lieutenant Odin is we've given him Valorous Duel, and then we've also given him Madness. Damage increased by 50% against units with 75% or less, and we'll show you why after this. And then First Blood, damage increased by 30% against units with full health, also applies fragility for 2 rounds. He's also got Battle Cry, which is super useful. It's got the same area of effect as the Inspiration, so I find what I do lately is drop the Inspiration and the Battle Cry just to get everyone juiced up a little bit with movement and a bit of rage and brutality. And then Alacrity has a 25% chance to dodge ranged area of effect attacks and melee attacks. And then the class specialization was for the First Blood. rather than his Daredevil. Thing is, Daredevil unit gains frenzy for 3 rounds, so this unit's damage increases as their health decreases, and their attacks always land critical hits. So their attacks always landing critical hits is really nice. However, the damage increasing as their health decreases, this would be more for a specialized build. I believe there's something on here where you can fanaticism. At the end of the turn, this unit loses 10% of their maximum health to gain fury. So it's something that you could make a specialized build and get a lot more mileage out of Daredevil, but for me, I'd rather just go with the class specialization because I think there are better braveries. And as I've said previously, you only need a few braveries typically in a party because most fights, at the very most, are only going a handful of rounds. Usually they're over in the first couple of rounds, so you'll only have the opportunity to use 2 or 3 braveries most likely, so you don't need a lot of them. But in any case, let's see what else we've got here on Odin. Hasar's two-handed axe cut in 2, fatal blow. This skill can be reused in this round. We've given him this axe, and that's why madness damage increased by 50% against units with 75% or less. So pretty much guarantees that any units that taken a bit of damage, he can finish them off pretty much for sure. And then we've also given him first blood so that potentially he can take out units in one shot. This skill is reused if he hits a fatal blow. So he can mop up a fair bit of enemies, and then we've put critical damage on there, the sharpening oil and the Braves oil. And Braves oil is really important for him because we've also made him a lieutenant. Essentially, each one of these abilities, which usually we're triggering at the beginning of the battle, we usually trigger on his first turn. All 3 of these abilities, they cost 1 valor less because we're recouping 1 with the Brave oil there. So drop the tactical order, drop the ovation, and drop the battle cry, and then basically ready to go. And he's wearing right now Outlaw's gear. This is one of my favorite gear sets. I like the style of it, but we kept the venomous coating for now. I think there are probably stronger stamps that we can put on this for the later game, but in the early game the venomous coating was fine. It worked really well. And then reinforced layer of the stag, just give him a little bit more strength, a little bit armor. But I mean, the key ability here is the ovation. The battle cry is a nice touch, and making him a lieutenant, giving him the tactical order, and then putting the Braves oil on there just makes him really a great utility to use every battle. And as I said, nothing too flashy here, but it's a build, the Sentinel, that I feel like I couldn't go without now that I've used it a fair bit. And then of course he's a miner, which is a good, well-rounded profession. Gives you a little bit more toughness with the constitution and a little bit more hitting power with the strength. So a nice balanced profession. And then he's got a pick, has a higher chance of finding either right when mining. Anyway, guys, let's get into the final 2 builds. Number 2, this one is so much fun, but fair warning, guys, it's a Pandora's box type situation. The Cutthroat is extremely broken. It's very satisfying using these guys, especially when you have them firing on all cylinders. You can pretty much wipe out an entire platoon with these boys, but at the same time, it makes the game incredibly easy, which kind of ruins a bit of the fun. I mean, once you've hit a certain point, once you've gotten to a certain level and you've got your gear all sort of upgraded to the same level, I would say probably around like level 11, level 12 especially, when you've unlocked the braveries, you're pretty much unstoppable, provided that you've got a well-equipped party. And the game does get a lot easier just because you have so many options and your group is so powerful. But this guy is just on a whole other level. Untrari, Artemis Untrari, the famous assassin from the R.A. Salvatore books. We've made him a thief, which gives him dexterity and critical hit. And then Valorous Victory, this one is essential, and he is a cutthroat. The big thing here is the Fatal Blow. This skill can be reused in this round. Anytime he makes a kill with this ability, it resets the ability and you can use it again. However, it is very expensive, which means eventually you're going to run out of Valor unless you take the appropriate steps, which we'll cover here in a moment. Another key skill is the Instinctive Throw. Pretty much put this on all the Rangers. It's just really, really strong. The fact that it resets the movement once it's been upgraded with a skill book just makes these guys just pretty much unstoppable. They can keep going and going and going. We've given him Cold-Blooded. Damage of attacks from behind increased by 35%. And then we've done the class specialization as well so that he can have Anticipation, which means if he does get attacked, he's got a 50% chance to deal an attack of opportunity rather than being engaged. And Unstoppable, I find Unstoppable is super useful to sneak in between those enemy ranks. You can get in and out of where you need to go without wasting movement or Valor points using Run. And then he doesn't really need a second weapon because he's got a really strong weapon. He's using Krupe's Sax. This you get from the champion in Dromback, I believe, who's a tough fight, but definitely doable. All right, what else have we got him tricked out with? So, right, he's a Master Thief. He's using the Bar of Soap. Pocket Knife, I think, is super useful for him. And he's using Faithless, which you earn from the arena in Drawback. So after using a skill, this unit, even if they are engaged, deals 22 damage to the farthest enemy within 6 meters. So essentially, every time he uses Frenzy, he does a throw with Faithless, and he does also the Instinctive Throw. So every attack is attacking 3 times, and you need Faithless to soften up other enemies to make sure that you're triggering the Fatal Blow Frenzy. So you want to pick your targets carefully where you're hitting the softer targets first, and then you're softening up the other targets. But essentially, once you get going with these guys, you can do significant damage. And so what we've given him here, we've given him Colossal Reinforced Layer of the Rat, give him more movement, more critical hit. We've given him 2 of those, and we've given him 1 Mare Brooch, which gives him 15% critical hit, but reduces his movement. So essentially, we've given him +1 movement and +27 critical hit for a pretty solid critical hit. His helmet, there are other stamps that you could use here, but Galvanizing Shout, this unit and the adjacent allied target gain inspiration for 1 round. Again, common theme, just gives him more flexibility, and if he doesn't have quite enough movement to get somewhere, we can double up his movement with the Galvanizing Shout to make sure that he can get there. Not to mention triggering this, if there's enemies nearby, it will also trigger his Instinctive Throw as well. So using any one of these abilities can potentially trigger the Instinctive Throw. The one thing you want to be careful about is units with counterattacks. For example, the Inquisition Crossbowmen in particular. If you're hitting them with Instinctive Throws, they will fire back at you and can make very quick work of your Cutthroat here. So you want to be very careful for those. And to make this really work, you essentially have to trigger your tactical order to double up the Valor that you're getting from Valorous Kill. So if we go back to Untrari, take a look here. So we've put the Brave's Oil on here. So he's got a 50% chance to gain back Valor every time he uses this. So 0.5 Valor he gets every time. And then he's also got Valor's victory. So if he is getting the kill, that means 1.5 Valor that he's getting back. But if you've triggered your tactical order, then he generates twice as much Valor, which means he will... where did he go? Where's Contrary? Oh, God. Which means you're back to even. Gets you back to getting 3 Valor for every time you make a kill. And then as you get going, as you start making more and more kills, if you've done a lot of the pathways where you're getting, for example, Power and Glory, each time one of your units kills an enemy, they deal 5% extra damage for the duration of the fight. If you've got Power and Glory leveled up all the way, as he's fighting, he will continue dealing more and more damage, which means sometimes he will be getting the kill with Faithless or with the Instinctive Throw, which means he'll start to generate surplus Valor over time, so long as you've dropped the tactical order on him. And then another thing you can do as well is you can drop the Battle Cry, which will juice him up a little bit. And if you want to really go all out, what you can also do is you can drop down the Bravery. Actually, he doesn't have it. Conan does. You can drop down one of these Braveries, the Exhort. The unit and all allies in the area gain Zeal for 2 rounds, which means critical hit and critical damage is increased by 30%, which is super, super useful. Yeah. Like I said, use at your own risk, because it's incredibly satisfying to be able to go through an entire group of enemies, to go through like 30 guys, no problem, just like butter. But at the end of the day, it does make the game a little bit too easy, and it might lessen some of your enjoyment. But I mean, by the time you get to this stage in the game, I think you just kind of want to get through things and wrap things up. But yeah, he's so good. Anyway, let's move on to the number 1, my favorite build. Coming in at number 1 is the Executioner, my Lamborghini build. Yeah, this has been my favorite for quite a while. I just really enjoy using this character. I find they're good in the early game, the mid game, and even the late game. And they're just a lot of fun to use. Usually what I like to do is kick off the battle with my Executioner in most situations, just because you'll be able to knock out a bunch of units right off the bat. It is a little bit heavy on the Valor, but at the same time, taking out 3 units, 4 units, 7 units, 8 units all at once can really shift the dimension of the battle in a hurry, and just even the odds to the point where the battle is a lot more manageable. And that's exactly what your Executioner can do. So we've made her a blacksmith. Use her plus 10 strength. We want her to be able to deal as much damage as possible. So that's why she is the blacksmith. The Executioner ability, Cutting Maelstrom, deals 49 damage to all units in the target area. Attacks 1 time for each unit in the area. So the more units that you're able to get within reach of this, there's a 2-meter area, the more times this attack will be delivered. And we've given her Valor's Chain for obvious reasons. Recklessness, first attack of each fight deals 150% extra damage. This is usually the first one I go with, and then we've done class specialization to give her First Blood as well. Damage increased by 35% against units with full health. Also applies fragility for 2 rounds. So we've given her this because, like I said, I often like to kick off my fights with the Executioner. You don't necessarily have to. You'll still get the recklessness boost, even if she's not the first one to attack. She gets this boost on her first attack. Oftentimes, I like to kick off the battle with her, and having the First Blood is useful for that. And then Challenging Shout. This is what really makes her a little bit more versatile. because you're able to, if the enemies are spread out a bit, you can pull them in, and oftentimes you can cut through a few of them with your first attack, and then you can pull a bunch of the others in, and then you're able to really make use of the executioner ability. Like I said, like oftentimes taking out like 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 guys all at once, and it just really evens the odds, especially if you're outnumbered by quite a bit. And then we've also given her Lone Wolf, and so you might say, well, Lone Wolf is not going to be very practical in a party as big as mine, but the thing is, when you're moving her into attack, she's usually 5 meters away from the rest of the troops, so she will get that additional damage. So damage increased by 10%. I mean, there's an argument to be made for Alacrity has a 25% chance to dodge range, area of attack, or area of effect and melee attacks. I wouldn't make any qualms about choosing that one, but I feel like Lone Wolf, you'll get a little bit more mileage out of that. And the main reason why I've gone with Lone Wolf is because we want her to deal as much damage as possible. So I've chosen skills that are going to deal more damage, whereas this is more of a defensive skill. And yeah, we want her dealing maximum amount of damage, like everything from her profession to the skills that she's been given are to deal maximum damage. And then in terms of gear, she is tricked out. I mean, there are plenty of axes that you can use for this. The cutter is another good one, and the mutiny is another good one. Mutiny does a attack in a circle as well, similar to the maelstrom. You just get the one round of it, but it is a good one for your executioner. But we are going with Enil's Great Axe, which you will get from the tomb in Baleria, in the Balerian DLC, the Pirates DLC. And in my opinion, this is probably the best Great Axe in the game. I mean, there may be others that you can make the argument for. The one that Odin is using is really good, but this is not a legendary axe. It is really good, and I was tempted to go with 2 weapons for her, which is another option that you could do. That way you can have this weapon as your primary attack, and then in certain situations you could switch to this Hissir's two-handed axe. So that way, like if you want to deal a lot of damage out to multiple enemies, use this. Or if you're in a situation where there are a lot of softer enemies and you could potentially kill them all by resetting, triggering the fatal blow and resetting the skill, then you could switch to that axe in certain situations. So it'd be like a situational thing. But like I said, we've just basically gone with max damage. And so this axe deals 98 damage to all units in the area and gains 1 fervor for each unit hit. So critical hit gains 1 extra fervor. Damage increased by 10%, stackable 10%. So usually I like to go with this attack first so that we can get that damage increase going, and then we hit the cutting maelstrom. And we've put on explosive oil because this has a massive area of effect attack, 3 meters. I mean, I say massive, but I mean 3 meters is quite a bit for a two-handed weapon. It's not bad. You can get quite a few guys in there. Usually at least, well, obviously at least 2, but usually at least 3 guys you can hit with this, and sometimes you might be able to squeeze in 4 if you're lucky. But we've put explosive oil in there as well because typically she's hitting guys that are fairly close together, so that explosive oil triggers. And then critical damage, the sharpening oil. You get this in the first apothecary, but I think personally it's one of the most practical oils that you can use in the game, and it's useful early game and late game in my opinion. And then we're going Colossal Layer of the Stag for her armor layers. And then for her stamp is the stimulating coating, damage increased by 20% if the unit has no debuff. So long as she doesn't have a debuff, she's doing 20% more damage. And then she's also got the pocket knife. And the armor that she's rocking is legendary armor from the Arena of Legends. It doesn't give, I wish these armors gave like a willpower bonus or a critical hit bonus or something like that as well, but the legendary armors typically I think give a bit more guard and a bit more armor than the others, so makes them a little bit more tankier, but you don't get that additional little bonus. And then she's using the swage bonus, has a chance to create an item of superior quality just for her blacksmithing. But yeah, this one is my favorite. It's a lot of fun to use, and it's even the odds in countless fights for me, and I just have a lot of fun. It might not be the strongest build, definitely, but it's a lot of fun. But anyway, guys, I hope this was helpful for you. I know a lot of people have been asking for some builds. Like I said, we'll try and get into more detail of these. We'll do them individually potentially, and just give some examples of how to use them. And then we could make another list of 10 builds, because I mean there's lots of different builds that you can go with in this game. But these are more my personal favorite. They're not necessarily the best builds in the game, but yeah, these are just kind of my favorite ones that I like to use. So like I said, hope this was helpful. Have yourselves a wonderful day, and I'll see you soon. Otto signing out.